Hi, I'm Cathe Holden and welcome to my home studio. I call this place Inspired Barn. It's like a big outbuilding right next door to our house. So it's about 1,000 square feet, and behind me is it's kind of a sewing area. Behind the camera is the workshop area and where I do a lot more art and craft. I also, up to the right, is my computer area where I do graphic design. So I'm a new designer with Motive Fabrics, and I'm so excited to have my very first collection with them. It's called Flea Market Mix, and just thank you so much to all the stores who are carrying it. It's a different look, and I can appreciate that maybe more traditional quilters, it may not be for them, but I think it's very fun. It's a little bit funky, and the possibilities and the usage of it are just, I don't know, there's just no limit. And I think it's especially fantastic for crafters because there's so many different elements about it that can be used for different things. It comes in the different pre-cuts, the jelly roll and the charm packs and the layer cakes and the fat quarters. So the behind the design has a lot to do with the things I like to collect and the things I like to do. I love to go to flea markets, whether they're outdoor flea markets or they're indoor flea markets. Here in Northern California, we mostly have the outdoor flea markets. I know when I visit my sister in Missouri, we go to all the indoor flea markets, which are more like what we would have here are antique collectives. One of the things that I do collect vintage quilts. I collect a lot of things, as you can probably tell from behind me. But one of the things I collect a lot of is vintage ephemera. And I realize not everybody knows exactly what that word means. It's spelled E-P-H-E-M-E-R-A. An ephemera is technically an ephemeral item that was never meant to be kept. Kind of had a one-time use. For an example would be like a movie ticket. You would use the ticket once, then you throw it in the trash. Well, a lot of us want to collect those movie tickets from the past, or ticket stubs. And today it sort of encompasses a lot of things, from photographs to trade cards, little advertisements, mostly paper items. Not everything under the umbrella of ephemera has to be paper, but that's kind of the gist of it. So I have a huge collection of ephemera, and so I've picked out some of my favorites and worked them in together. Examples might be, well, my mother-in-law's, report card. She didn't really know it was in the fabric until the fabric was done, but she was a good sport. The milkman label, or where you check off what you want in the morning. Different things. I have I collect Victorian scrapbooks if I can find them cheap, and half the time they're just half destroyed. There's not much left to them, but I find some of the most beautiful florals. So you'll see these florals in my fabric, vintage photos, like game spinners, things like that. So this is kind of ephemera, even woven apparel labels. Gosh, I collect a lot of things that have to do with cigars and cigar boxes. German die cuts, which are those embossed kind of labels that you'll see. Here's an example of a trade card. Let's see, I have another one. So this is referred to as a trade card, which advertising for the trades. And a lot of times they would be really beautiful little cards that would be then later imprinted with the names and such. So that's ephemera. That's my ephemera. Also, ephemera would be, of course, recipe cards. I call that ephemera too. So, gosh, I love ephemera. I mean, recipe cards, especially the ones that are all stained, because those are always you can tell those are the ones that were used the most. So anytime I'm out shopping and I can find a vintage tin full of handwritten or old stained recipe cards, what a day that is for me. So I get pretty excited. That's a lucky shop day for me. So my first design, this is ephemera collage, and you'll see it's sort of one panel that's been repeated, which makes a nice overall print, which could be like a whole cloth quilt, or it could be cut into small panels. You could cut out little snippets of it for different things. My second one is, this is called ephemera flat lay. If you hear the term flat lay, I mean, I guess it's just a photography term for laying things out flat, taking an overhead photo of them, like they're not touching, they're just kind of a little bit apart. And it's sort of a really neat shot of a lot of things at once that kind of work together. So that's ephemera flat lay. This piece actually, on the bolt, it goes, it's a very wide piece. So there's this, it's not just this and repeat, but there's even more goodies on the other side. This is just the fat quarter. This might be my favorite only because it has so many things you can pull from it, whether you fussy cut out the little pieces, use it as a whole. I think it works really nice as is, cut and made into bags. And again, you could do another whole cloth backing of a quilt or a front of a quilt. This comes in 2 colorways. So this has the cream background. It also comes in the turquoise background. See, this is the, these are trade card labels. So these are the labels. And is that what I called them? I have to think about what I called them. And so these make really nice small quilt labels. They make, gosh, so many cute things like, you could do name tags, you could do greeting cards, you could do, you know, there's, I like to rubber stamp within here. You could embroider within there. I'll show you some examples in a little bit of what I do with these. So that's the entirety of the design, and then it repeats. There's that many. So I've seen some people who have been working with this so far using, you know, a marker to write in there, a permanent marker. I prefer to use rubber stamps with permanent ink that won't wash out. Or I'll hand write it first, and then I like to embroider it. And then, like I mentioned, I love the recipe cards. So, and I've seen recipe card fabric before, but I really liked laying it out on a grid like this. Then you can actually access the individual recipe cards if you want to make patches or just, you know, applique items. But then as a whole, it works really nice. And it's a little bit muted of a color, so it works great as the backing to a quilt. And then I have my florals, which I'm so, God, I love these so much. So the florals, by the way, yeah, that's right, I don't have any more colorways. So I do have colorways. So the, I wanted to show you this came in another colorway. Can you tell it's my first time at this? So this is the other colorway on those. So pretty. This pink is called Rhubarb. Anyway, so I have the florals, which is a nice overall print, and this comes in several colorways. Love that. This other floral, sort of a floral, it's called nesting. So it's, if you look really close, it's little birds, 2 little birds on a blossom branch with eggs in a nest. I think it's just super cute. And that's the logo for this particular flea market mix. That's the little logo you'll see in the wording. And this comes in different, so these 3 colorways. I also should mention to you that my flat lay, I don't know if I just showed this or not, the flat lay comes also with a turquoise background. So that's really nice. The buttons, how fun are buttons? Everybody loves buttons. I've been collecting all kinds of buttons. It's not like I go out and collect them, but I'll rescue any tin full of buttons that anybody's getting rid of. And then I love, you know, sorting them like I'm a child, but I love sorting buttons. And I have some of my favorites are these little plastic, they're like pierced and pressed designs in them. Some of them have shanks, some of them have the holes. They're just so sweet. There's something about them that's, because they're plastic, but they're so decorative, that makes them a little bit humble. They're like the poor man's fancy button. So I painstakingly photographed every single one of my favorites and and then I digitized them, and I made this buttoned fabric design. So this comes in with the white buttons. You've got the 3 different colorways, and then I actually in Photoshop I did recolor them so that there's they have color in another one, and that also comes in another colorway in the turquoise. So I also have some blender fabrics that match the whole collection. And it's sort of a parchment. I call it flax. Has this really nice pattern to it. gives it some texture. These work really nice as blenders. So I'm going to show you some of the projects I've been making. And because we weren't going to quilt show, I didn't have all the things ready. Some people have been working on some quilts and different projects for me. Currently for this trunk show, I'm going to just show you the things that I've made, but I'm going to add a few, if I can, add a few photos of some of the different things that are being made from other people. So this fabric works so good with other fabrics in that it you know, it works great as a collection, bits and pieces put together. But I was going through some of my vintage fabrics and other fabrics, and you can see how just some of the elements are really fun to add in. This is just a small runner that's been hand stitched. It's more of an improv runner. I was just kind of whipping it up, putting it together, using some of my fabrics. I've been doing a lot of hand stitching. So here's another example of, or here is an example of one of the labels being used with a rubber stamp in it. And you can see how this is a vintage tea towel. You can see how things work really well together. I'm also a designer of vintage style stencils. So my stencil line, you can kind of see one of them. They're called Inspired Barn stencils. They work really well with this fabric line as well. You can see here I did a little peekaboo window with a little house from the collage fabric. There's another stencil, the floral fabric, the buttons. You can also use some of the ephemera as labels inside your projects or outside your projects. But I think this fabric just works really nice in so many ways, especially those little bits and pieces that you can fussy cut. The labels that I was showing you earlier, they work really fun as little pin cushions. I mean, how many, I don't know if you saw these, you probably did see these sitting out front, but I've been showing them on Instagram. I love little vintage trucks. I love collecting vintage trucks, and I always had to put something in the truck, in the bed if I can. So this is sort of my collection of fabric in a convoy, which is fun. I mean, you just can't have too many pin cushions if you ask me. And here's a little needle book, again using that Moda, that wool from the wool scrap bags, and again just rubber stamping. I like having my needles separated by the style of needle instead of all my needles together. And again, another pin cushion, but this is using the recipe cards. There's some really cute things to be done with these recipe cards. I don't have my house is not eclectic like in my barn. It's a little bit more mid-century, a lot more minimal. And but if I had a guest house, I would be all over this fabric for the curtains. I did a little slow stitch collage project with all the different pieces of my collection. So just to kind of show how nicely they work together. I'll probably just shadow box that. So the collage panel, this is about the size of the one panel, and I made a little pillow out of it and beaded and embroidered little sections of it, which was just, gosh, such a fun like day project. And then on the back, I used appliqued one of the little labels and embroidered something on it. I suppose that could be a really heavy, big pin cushion if you wanted to go that route. The ring light that I'm using right now, I made a little cozy. This is my ring light cozy. And this is just a project that I'm working on. It's sort of in progress. It's just going to be a really big, long pillow. So this is the entire width of the ephemera flat lay. So you can see all the items that you just come in this section. And what I've been doing is going around and just doing a running stitch around a lot of the little pieces, using a little bit of padding on the back so that it'll have some depth to it, and then I'll turn that into one, like, not really a body pillow, but like one long pillow across the bed. That's one of my favorite things to do, is take distressed jeans or go ahead and distress the jeans using like a big metal file and a rock, and you can distress and make holes and things. You can use your Dremel, but I like to patch the jeans, add these little create these little windows, or if they already have a hole in them, you can sort of underpatch them, embroider, cuff, stencil. I wanted to showcase how cute all the fabrics went together, so I thought this would be a nice way to show this, is bow ties. So you can see individually they kind of stand on their own, but then together they really work fun together. I mean, if you were having a vintage style wedding, how cute would the bow ties be like that? Also with that flat lay, back to kind of the jeans and maybe a jean jacket, you can make little patches, again, using that wool, or not the wool, but I like to bond it to the wool and then do a little bit of embroidery around the edges and make really fun little patches to put on things. If you take the flat lay or any of the fabric, I suppose, and you can make the fabric buttons out of them, you know, kind of just snap together. I love making these. I mean, I could sit and just make these all afternoon, these little buttons. They make just the neatest, you know, if you group them together. This is just like a Target pillow, and I've grouped a bunch of these on there. Like, and under a yard, you've got all this fun little stuff on the flat lay. Here's another thing I did, is I sandwiched some wire between leaf shape, and then I went around the edges with ball chain to make little leaves on wire, and then using floral tape, you know, put them all together and just kind of made this ephemera wreath concept. So I like that for shadow boxing. And then also I've done all the lamps in my studio with the different florals of the fabric. I cannot wait to see what other people are going to do with this. If you do share it on Instagram, please use the hashtag Flea Market Mix so I can be sure and see it, because I'll be looking out for it as soon as this actually comes out in the stores and when people are actually able to get their hands on it. I'm very excited to see all the different ideas everyone comes up with. So that's it, and thank you for your time, and I'll see you on Instagram. Okay, bye.